Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Calgary Barbell. We are here on Friday for Form Check Friday. Just to give you guys a quick little bit of an update with what's been going on with the channel. You guys have probably noticed we haven't been putting out a lot of content as of late since Nationals. It did take us a little bit to get caught up with all the National stuff. We have some stuff that we've been working really hard on that we're really excited about that should be coming out within the next couple of weeks. As well, we'll be launching our full new line of apparel at the beginning of May coming up soon. So we're gonna show you guys some samples of that kind of stuff. We'll probably do a standalone video to talk a little bit more about the new videos, the new video series rather, and the apparel. So look out for that in the near future, but we're gonna get right into Form Check Friday for today. So our first submission here comes from Antoine Brett. He's from Belgium, and he says he has a little bit of an issue because his sumo is a lot better than his conventional. Now, personally, I don't see that as much of a problem. I would say just lift sumo. But his issue with that is that he says it messes with his squat. So first thing I would do is just try to acclimate to pulling sumo, because if you're pulling, you know, if he figures he's got between 190 and 200 kilos on his conventional, and he's only pulling on his sumo, and he's only pulling 175 conventional, I would say that's a sign you need to just pull sumo. You know, maybe program it in frequently to start off with and sort of get yourself used to doing that with your squat. But for posterity's sake, let's take a look at his conventional deadlifts here. So the biggest thing I'm noticing with his conventional is there's just really a lack of setting any tension into the bar. The best way for me to describe this is it looks like those guys from Aesthetics, super narrow stance, no back tension, slamming into the bar, and I just don't think that's going to work necessarily for everybody. So I think what you might need to do is you might need to take some of the cues that you're using for your sumo deadlift and use them on your conventional deadlift if you're 100% certain that you need to be deadlifting conventional. So pull more slack into the bar, be more patient, be more consistent and concerned with your technique. Silent Mike said it really well one time: sumo is making love, conventional is fucking. So think more about making love to your conventional deadlifts, and let's see if that helps. This next submission here comes from Emran, and Emran is doing some sumo deadlifts. And actually, this is something that I see very often in people who are just starting to sumo deadlift. And what he's doing is he's sitting his hips too low. So it looks like he's really trying to squat down to the weight, really trying to squat it up, which is a common cue and something that people will often tell you when you start pulling sumo. It also looks like this weight's really light, so he can kind of move it however he wants without much issue. So his back looks like it's in a really good position, but he's sitting his hips down so low that his knees are actually pushing the bar forward away from his body. So what I would cue you to do, Emran, sorry, is I would cue you to keep your knees back a little bit more, keep your weight on your heels a little bit more, and don't worry about sinking your butt so low. Just try and find a good position where you have a lot of tension through the hamstrings, glutes, and the back. Next submission comes from Rasmirum, and he's from Sweden. He says he's got an issue with his conventional deadlift as well. He seems to have a really rough time locking out. So we have a 230 kilo PB here from him. And honestly, most of your mechanics look really good till you get to about mid-knee, mid-thigh, just above the knee. So you get to about the mid-range of your pull. And what you're doing is you're kind of pushing your knees forward under the bar. And this might be taking away from your leverage in finishing the lift. So what I want you to try to do is try not to let your weight roll forward on your feet. Try not to let your knees go forward under the bar. Try and stay back, so it's hip extension finishing the lift as opposed to what looks like your sort of knee extension. I also think if it gets substantially heavier and you're having trouble or struggling, you're probably going to end up hitching with those mechanics. So that's the biggest thing I would work on, is try to keep your weight back on your heels and let your hips come up a little bit more as you go through the movement. You're staying super tall throughout, which is good off the floor, but that's causing you those issues at lockout. So try to keep the weight back on the heels so you're finishing with more of a hinge and less of a kind of standing up where the weight's kind of more in front of you. Our next one here comes from Fabio, and Fabio he sent in some meat footage here. So he says he's having trouble squatting mid-foot, narrowed his stance, that seems to help, but he dips forward pretty good in the hole. So We're gonna take a quick look at some mock meet footage from Fabio. And he says when he dips forward like that, his sticking point is really pronounced, and you can see it on most of these squats. Now, I don't think necessarily, Fabio, that that's a really big issue. I think that your squat technique looks really good. I think the knees rocking forward is to an acceptable amount in the bottom. One thing I might do is just try to work on tightening up in the hole. It looks like you're relying on a fair bit of the stretch reflex, which can work for some people and not so much for others. But if we can get you a little bit more tight and in control of that bottom position, that might carry over really, really well to making sure that you don't kind of hit that sticking point as hard. Next up, his bench press. He says his butt comes off and the bar path is a little bit shaky. So the biggest thing that I've found useful for somebody whose butt comes off the bench is try and flex your glutes harder. Generally, if we can flex the glutes harder, that will force you into full hip extension. And when you push, you're not gonna get your butt lifting up as much. That's just one cue that's worked for me and some of my lifters. So let's try that, squeeze your glutes a little bit harder. As far as the bar path goes, it looks like you're just kind of losing your shoulders as you press. Your bar path itself looks really good, but it's a lack of stability. So if we can come down, touch, and then flare back over the shoulders and press through, that's fine. But what's happening is we're coming down, and as we flare back, the shoulders are rising to a position where we're in poor leverage. So I want you to work on keeping those shoulders glued as you flare back to finish the movement. Lastly is deadlift. He's pulling sumo here. With larger weights, his hips start to shake and the vibrating hurts his lockout. Honestly, I think the reason that you might be having some of these issues is we're really not pulling the slack out of the bar properly. It looks like you're kind of pulling back on the bar and then just starting to pull immediately. And what I would want you to do is think about pulling yourself down to the bar a little bit more, maintaining a bit of a better back angle because it looks like you're rounding pretty good, especially in the low back, right in sort of the junction between the pelvis and the lumbar spine. We need to try to keep that a little bit more extended so that, again, you can finish the lift in a better leveraged position. So as you go through the mid-range of motion, you're in a little bit of flexion, and that can cause some of that sort of skipping feeling or the vibrating or shaking. So let's work on your back extension. Let's work on finding a bit of a better way to pull into the bar and to find tension through the lats, the low back, the hips, and the hamstrings all before you pull. So even if that means you pull in and you have to hold it for a second and rock your hips back and forth, or allow your knees to track forwards or backwards to find that right spot, let's practice that in training so the next time you compete or do a mock meet like this, you're able to just kind of snap into the right position and go from there without being sort of loose on the bar when you're starting. Next up, we have one from Mark Bloom, and he is doing a bit of a comparison here, which I thought was interesting and worth showcasing on our Form Check Friday here. So he's doing two different things with his feet in his squats. He's doing, he's got 6 sets of 2 at 85%, and he's doing alternating toes pointed forward and toes pointed out. So it looks to me that the toes pointed out, you're able to stay a tiny bit more upright, but I honestly don't think the toe angle is really making that much of a difference in the squat. If I were to critique your squat, my biggest criticism would be that you're getting really pitched forward out of the bottom of each rep. So it's hard to see from the front angle exactly what's going on, but I would work on keeping your knees forward over your toes a little bit more. And I would also work on trying to maintain a little bit more core and upper back tension as you rebound out of the hole. A couple things that can really help with this are going to be pause squats and pin squats. So I would try to work those into your programming over the next little while. As far as my opinion on the feet forward versus feet out, I think personally the feet out looks a little bit better on you. Next up from James Joyce, he's doing some low bar squats here, 200 kilos for a triple here, and this is a PR for James. So obviously we're probably going to see some things being compromised when you're working with maximal or PR weights. One of the big things that I notice is as James comes out of the hole, you can see his knees collapse pretty good, and he's getting pitched forward as a result of that. So the first thing that I'm going to get you to try, now I often say to do things and I often say to try things, and that's because there's no way for me to know that what I tell you to do is going to be exactly what you need to do. What I can do is I can give you a couple of things to try that may or may not help you. So let's try squatting with a little bit of a narrower stance, because I think you're going to have an easier time keeping your knee aligned with your hip and your ankle if you're in a bit of a narrower stance. It looks like that stance might be a little bit wide for the way that you're built and the way that you squat. And that could be why you said you misgrooved the last 2 of these reps, and I think that's probably why. Let's narrow that stance a little bit. And I want you to try and think less about pushing your knees out, because it looks like to overcompensate, once you get your knee angle back in control, you're going way outside of where you should be. And you can actually see on a couple of reps, you're up on the outside of your foot pretty good. So I would try to think more about just keeping your knees over your toes. Don't think about pushing your knees out really hard. Just think about keeping your knees forward and in line with your ankles and your toes. As well as the narrower stance, that should hopefully help you get or maintain rather a little bit more of an upright posture in your squat, and make sure that we're not getting a lot of valgus knee crash and a lot of forward lean that we're not looking for. Next up, we have Tyson Exner, and Tyson's doing some equipped bench, so I just had to put it in here. He's got 405 on here. He just got into a new shirt. I think he said he's got a low cut super katana now. Just a super katana. He says he notices in my videos that I also have a problem touching. That's for sure. That is definitely the case. Is there something he could be doing different, or is there just not enough weight? So he's got 405 on here. He's going to a 2 board and doesn't quite make it to the 2 board, or maybe that's a 1 board. Anyways, he's got a bench block on the bar, so he's trying to get the bench block to his chest, and it looks like he doesn't quite make it. I don't think necessarily that you're doing much wrong. I think you will need a little bit more weight, and that's sort of part of the learning curve of using a shirt, is figuring out, you know, what sorts of weights you can use and how much range of motion you can get out of a given weight in a given shirt, and getting stronger on the top end to make sure that you can get lower and lower. So honestly, I would say we've got Dylan doing some equipped bench right now, and I would say just try and create a bit of a progression for yourself with boards that you can touch, and then work your way down. That's an easy way to do it. I think if you want, you could try ghost boarding as well, which is what I do, and just try to, you know, work your way down a little bit lower, a little bit lower. I think with the boards, sometimes it can mess with your groove and your pressing. A lot of times guys will kind of bounce off the boards and get a lot of oomph out of that, whereas you're not gonna be able to do that in competition, especially off your chest, so that can make things a lot more challenging. The other thing that I wanted to point out is as you transition from the descent to the press, you're really kind of just throwing the bar. And what's happening is you're losing shoulder position, and you're not using the shirt as well as you could if you were a little bit more patient in the transition from the descent to the press, and made sure that you kept your shoulders and your lats and rear delts and everything like that engaged a little bit more as you kind of reversed the bar back up. I think you'll end up with a lot better press if you think about being smooth as opposed to being fast in the transition. So let's try some of those cues, and maybe set yourself up on a bit of a board progression, or just really slowly kind of working with singles and ghost boarding. But it looks to me like you're just gonna need more weight. If it's a new shirt, you're probably gonna need to break it in a little bit more. So focus on some of those things, and honestly, keep me posted, because I'm interested to see how that goes for you. And our last submission here comes from Lee, and Lee's doing some sumo deadlifts, and he mentions in the email that he's trying to get his knees locked as soon as possible. Now, I think, again, this is a cue that works really well for some people, but it's very sort of context sensitive, and I think Lee is actually locking his knees too soon. And I think that is definitely a thing that people can do. So if you watch, first off, Lee's losing back position off the floor. That's the number one thing that I would focus on, Lee, is setting better tension through your back and your lats. The next thing is when you're locking knees too soon and your back's out of position, that makes it really, really hard to finish. And you can see Lee has to hitch it a couple times to get it to lock out. So I mean, in a competition, that's gonna be a red lighted lift. That's not gonna count, which is a bummer when you fight for a lift like that. So set tension better into your back. Don't worry about locking your knees so soon, because with a little bit of a compromised back angle, that's just gonna make your lockout even that much harder. So let's work on smoothing the knee lockout a little bit and on bracing that back position a little bit better. That's it for this week, guys. We are up to February 13th, so we are slowly trucking along. That is it for Form Check Friday. I think I said that already, but we'll see you guys next week, and stay tuned for a video where we outline some of the things that we're going to be doing over the next little while, and we'll showcase some of the new apparel. See you guys soon. See you guys soon. Bye.